RTHK Radio 3.
You're listening to Brunch with me, Noreen Mir, on this Thursday morning. Now, today we're going to shine a light on a topic that affects so many women. We're going to be talking about women's mental health. Now, in the hustle and bustle of daily life, whether it's juggling careers, family, and also personal responsibilities, it's often easy to overlook our own well-being. So we're going to be diving into this conversation to explore the unique challenges that women face, and I'm really excited to be chatting once again with clinical psychologist Dr. Quratulain Zaidi. Welcome back on the program, Dr. Zaidi, and thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Noreen. It's always a pleasure.
Now, we are live this morning on Facebook, so grab a coffee. Do join us this morning there. Noreen Mir on RTHK Radio 3. Let's dive right in. That's not to say we're not focusing on men's health, but for today's program, it's more about the women in our lives, and I'm sure many of you will have a wife, a girlfriend, a mum, a sister, a friend who is a woman. So perhaps let's talk about some of the unique mental health challenges that women have, especially round about midlife. What can you share with our listeners this morning?
So, the midlife for women is usually not to say that not so much for men, as you just say, but it is around, they're more likely to, it's the career shifts, caregiving responsibilities, evolving family dynamics. Those are the parts that are constantly playing a role within their lives at that stage of their life. And they're more likely than men, research shows, to experience anxiety and depression due to, firstly, the hormonal fluctuations, but it's not all due to that. It's also the societal expectations that what we are expected to do within our roles, and the stress from balancing those multiple roles that we have. So we do have the role of the caregivers for our parents, being the parent for the children as well. Of course, we have partnerships, but it is, that role of the parent being the role of the person that you are going out, your work identity, as well as being a partner. So, all of those multiple roles that we play do have an impact. Combine that with the hormonal kind of avalanche that we go through around. Sorry, that I can't think of a better word, but that's what it is. End of 30s, it's like, yeah.
It's a roller coaster, absolutely. And I think, with career shifts and, moving towards middle management or even, higher. And if you choose to have children, then you've got to juggle the children and their school and the stresses that the children face. And like you mentioned, parents also, if we're lucky enough to have our parents around, as our parents get older, it is quite a lot of responsibility to shoulder. I want to talk a little bit more about caregivers. You mentioned that earlier also, the role of caregiving, and how does that impact the mental health of women?
So, you might have heard the term sandwich generation, which is simultaneously caring for both children and aging parents. And that's where I'm finding a lot of my peers, or, even that's where we're at. And what I'm seeing more and more, even in my own practice, is that people who are in this age group are finding it very challenging. It's a reality that you've got aging parents, and the caregiving role, the chronic stress and burnout due to that constant caregiving demands is a real thing. It really is. Being able to manage, the care for your aging parents if you're living away from them, and then managing those family dynamics within within your siblings and, the system within that, and trying to manage to the best of your ability without feeling constantly guilty about it is something that is a real thing that people are talking about. There's the emotional exhaustion from managing the needs of multiple dependents, not so much the dependents, but people who you feel responsible for their well-being and their care. So it's not that they've chosen to be dependent on you. You take on that responsibility to be able to do that as well. And there is certainly the increased risk of depression and anxiety when you feel overwhelmed or unsupported, depending on the dynamics of the system around you. And then obviously, women, I haven't come across many. There are some, but most of us tend to put ourselves at the bottom of the list. So the neglect of self-care, personal health, well-being, they always take a back seat. So if you have a doctor's appointment, of course it can wait because it's not urgent. If you have, something that you want to do, so if something else comes up, you will cancel your plans. So that kind of tends to fall by the wayside, self-care. So all of that leads to a huge, stressor.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Zaidi. And I say, and I'm nodding as you're saying, we put ourselves bottom and we shift our schedule around to accommodate for our loved ones, and it's natural for women to do so. And I say this because I recently went to the dentist. Actually, when I say recently, just a few days ago, and my dentist was like, "Whoa, how long have you had that pain in your tooth for?" And I sort of said like 3 months. It wasn't. It was about 6 months. And I think the dentist knew. He was like, really? Because had you come to me 3 months ago, you wouldn't need a root canal. And I was just like, oh no. So then I had to get that done. And it's just something as simple, it's not like a life-threatening thing, but I can imagine some women are in that situation where they put off the body check, they put off going to the doctors, even if they feel a lump in their breast or whatever it is, and just putting themselves lower and lower. And that's not to say there's no rewards in caring about your loved ones, but in order to be a good caregiver, self-care is so important. I want to also talk a little bit more about managing work-life balance. Some women are career women as well. So apart from balancing the role at home, looking after their family, it's also the load of juggling a career. How does that sort of play into a woman's mental health?
Look, work-life balance it's made up of various different facets, right? So it is about finding fulfillment, having meaningful interactions. All of that is what fills you up. All of those things are what give you the fuel, right? They are the contributors that give you the currency in your an energy bank account, emotional bank accounts, all of those things that keep you going. So it is about being able to find a balance between what is going to be creating a positive, currency deposits in your emotional, psychological well-being, and then being able to manage all of this where you've got to do the physical work as well as be able to focus on your work, because at this stage a lot of women are at the top of their careers or heading towards the top of their careers as well, and the jobs become so much more demanding and the pressures become so much more demanding. So it does lead to stress, exhaustion, feeling of inadequacy in each part of your life. You're not being a good parent, you're not being a good caregiver, not being a good child, you're not performing to the best of your ability at work as well. However, as I said, if you are able to kind of put that into place where you're kind of small things that you can do to maintain your levels in constant, not in the negative or even in positive, that is helpful. So being able to ask for help, being able to delegate some of the responsibilities where you can, setting realistic expectations of yourself. So being able to go to the dentist, maybe.
I know. There'll be no teeth left. I won't be able to do my job. I know. But a gummy bear here, teeth loose and whatnot. But speaking of work, and I read a quote recently, and that really resonated with me. And it said, the only people that's going to remember you working late 20 years from now aren't really your colleagues. It's your children. So I think that puts things into perspective. Now, I'm not encouraging our listeners to just, skive off work this afternoon, but, leave at a decent hour. There'll always be work for you to do, and just, make a to-do list and not have to stay in the office till about 8 or 9 and miss out on the bedtime routines perpetually, because that ultimately adds to the guilt and also the stress of not being a present parent. Speaking of sort of self-care, it's also really crucial for women to have their own support systems to foster, better mental health. How can women foster that? I like the way you put it, Dr. Zaidi. It's that emotional currency, that bank account. If you don't invest in your friends or that network, then you'll wake up one day and you'll have, an empty bank account or empty emotional savings. So how is it important? How should we be strengthening these connections and reaching out to our friends more?
I feel that maybe Esther Perel says it the best, really, that, we expect so much from, she says it in the context of relationships, that, a partner these days is supposed to provide everything in your life, including your best friend, including, your mentor, including all of
Your
these different,
confidant, your lover, and just
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
right. However, I feel that it is so important for women, certainly, and I'm very lucky to have that you have a social support network and you constantly check in and invest in that, because what you get from that, you can't just get firstly, the pressure is off your poor
Your
husband,
partner. Yeah, exactly.
right? And secondly, that support, you can call somebody out, and you can it reduces the feelings of isolation and loneliness, that you're having to do this alone, because so many, as I say, are going through very similar experiences at the same time. And it does provide the emotional and practical support, because you might be just thinking about it in a certain way, and having somebody else's perspective, as you know, right? It's really helpful, and it does improve, it just being able to talk about it in a safe space where you know that people know you for who you are, and being able to say it as it is and share your feelings. It really is helpful, and it does help safeguard us with our mental health struggles, because then you're able to, at least once a month, or once every few weeks, if you catch up with your friends and different groups of friends. It really does, because I noticed a difference after COVID, when we weren't able to do this, and now that we are, it makes a huge difference. It really does. For myself, certainly, I feel lighter.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think, yeah, COVID was a time where everybody sort of socially isolated, but it was so nice to even catch up with people via Zoom, and you'd have like Zoom parties apart from Zoom meetings for work.
Yeah.
Also that. What other sort of a healthy coping mechanisms would you recommend for women juggling multiple roles?
Look, whatever works for you is the first thing, right? But meditation, mindfulness is not for everybody. But if it works for you,
Yes.
what that, or writing or journaling or exercising, all of these things are beneficial for reducing stress. These are the stress reduction strategies that I'm just mentioning. So mindfulness, meditation, exercise, journaling, uh, prioritizing sleep, eating well, all of these things contribute. But as I say, find something that works for you and be consistent with it,
Yeah.
because that's what's important at the end of the day. So if the 10-minute meditation works for you in the morning or in the evening, whenever you do it, just be consistent with it, because biologically it helps reduce the cortisol levels in your body, and helps maintain those levels at a lower level, as well as it closes your stress loop daily. So anything that helps close the stress loop, that's what you need to do. And it's different for different people.
Exactly. And also seeing a clinical psychologist or seeking help, going to a counselor, going to therapy also helps. However, I've got to say, often, and I think the conversation is changing now, but stigma is a big thing. And I think decades, I mean, you've seen the sort of landscape change, Dr. Zaidi. but the stigma is still there. What sorts of barriers do women face when seeking mental health support?
It almost always comes down to one thing, that if I go and see a psychologist, then that, or if I even worse, if I have to take some medication for anything that might be real chemical imbalance, it means there's something wrong with me. That's the bottom line of it. So, and being able, that's a big one, right? That there's something wrong with me, therefore I need to go. So I should be able to fix this myself. However, just like your physical health, you need to go and see a doctor to be able to, or a dentist when you're in pain. Then it is important that because it is your mental health, it's your psychological well-being, it is your, emotional well-being. It's something that if you don't feel like yourself, it's okay to go. So it's about giving yourself permission to ask for help, and the other thing is the time constraints, that goes back to prioritizing your own needs and being able to find the time to be able to do that. And it's cultural and societal expectations as well within the collective culture in Asia. It is like you should be able to solve this within the family. You shouldn't talk about it outside the family. You know what your problems are, but it's not about the problems. It's not about that. It's just about being able to understand that what it is that is making me feel like this, and what are the things that I can do to help myself, and getting a better understanding of your own thinking patterns, belief systems, being able to reframe some of that, because and taking charge of your own mental well-being, I think, is the important part.
Exactly. And finally, what are the sort of the long-term implications? I mean, if a woman was not to have that self-care, was not to have healthy coping mechanisms, not to have, support system, what are some of the long-term, I mean, how detrimental is that for women's mental health, especially as we age? I mean, I read that we live much longer than men. Well, not much longer, but longer than men. It's kind of miserable if we're living in misery, I think.
Right. Look, I'm sorry, I just keep on going back to the example of your tooth, because you've mentioned two things in there, right?
Yes,
One of them is that if you had gone to seen him, yeah, and seen him 3 months ago, you wouldn't have needed the root canal, right?
exactly.
And if
Yes.
you'd gone and seen him immediately, it might have been a much less invasive procedure. Same thing applies, right? If you let it go for so long, it does become a part where you can't function. It gets in the way of your daily functioning, the chronic anxiety and depression. And the impact of that on your biochemistry long term is not good on every organ, right? So increased risk of physical illnesses such as heart disease, high blood pressure, cognitive decline, higher likelihood of dementia in later years, and strained relationships, because if you are not in a place to be able to be present, and not because there's it's not due to your own fault, but it's just something you just need to be able to take care of yourself in that way, then it is very much, it does have an impact, and you kind of become more and more isolated. You don't want to go and see people, you don't want to talk consistently, which is the best thing actually, is being able to go and see people when you feel like that. So relationships and your support network becomes impacted, because due to your own state. And then there is a loss of personal identity, because eventually, if you become consumed by just the caregiver role or the parent role, or the identity is so linked to your work, then it's just unhealthy in all of those domains, right? That's what it is. So yeah, so it is very, very important. Early intervention, it does prevent severe mental health disorders. So the severity, you catch it here, then it doesn't need to go here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I had gone to the dentist earlier, then I wouldn't be in this position. But I love that analogy. As always, I really, really enjoyed our conversation today, Dr. Zaidi, and I look forward to our next chat. And for our listeners, where can they find you? Are you on social media, and have you got a website?
Yes, so we're on Instagram and we're on Facebook, and the website is mindnlife.com. So you can find us on all of those places. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and I look forward to our next chat. Thank you very much indeed.